think now we're at a point where there are more conversations. And to go back to something Justin said, human dignity, we can be human and we can be dignified, and we are called to be that way, right? And treat people in a certain way. So now the conversations are coming up. Churches are different, pastors. I've been places that I never thought I would worship. There's been shifts, there's been conversations. So I think that we're in the bridge building stage, I would say.
And no matter what we believe doctrinally, we should all agree that people don't need to be discriminated against. They don't need to be harassed. They should not be abused or killed specifically because of, well, for anything, but because of their sexuality or their gender identity. No one deserves that. We were all made in the image of God. And so we have to respect that and protect people because of that. I think that's why, the legislation we're talking about is so important, is because it aims to love and protect everybody.
When it comes to violence, assault, murder, death, oppression, discrimination, there is a moral ethic that comes into play, I think, in response to those very real human experiences. That the visiting of death, murder, violence, assault upon any human being touches the heart of the divine, the heart of God, and it must therefore touch the heart of God's followers.
The Bible says in 1 John 3 that, this is how we know what love is, that Jesus laid down his life for us. I think what the Bible is saying there is that love ultimately is self-sacrificial. And unless the church is ready to be self-sacrificial for people in the LGBTQ community, we're not going to be living up to what the example that Christ has given us. One way to do that is there is some vile messaging coming from certain parts of Christianity aimed at the LGBTQ community. And if Christians aren't willing to stand up to that, to call that out, to lose friends, to lose funding or whatever you have to call those things out, then we're not who we're called to be. And so I think that's one major thing that we can do, is really step up and push back on those folks who are really bringing ugly, nasty messaging into this conversation that causes people to look at folks, this is the theme of the conversation so far, without their full human dignity. And if if we're not willing to stand up for that as much as we would stand up for ourselves and stand up for whatever issue that we may have, then we're not living up to the great commandment. And so I would say it has to be self-sacrificial. And that's why I like that this conversation is about policy. It's about putting our political capital on the line. It's about putting our social capital on the line, not just for ourselves, but for others. Because I truly believe that it's about changing things within your sphere of influence. Everybody can yell at the other side, but if you're in fellowship with folks who are putting out some of this vile messaging and imagery, then you need to do something about it. I think the Bible commands us in that regard.
What would you say to a fellow believer who supports civil rights for LGBTQ folks, but wants to be sure that religious communities can maintain their beliefs and practices? And, this leads us to the question of exactly the compromise, this bill that we are espousing. So what would you say in that instance? And I want to turn that back over to you, Justin, to start us off, if you don't mind.
True belief in what we would call civic pluralism would compel us to do the work of democracy. The work of democracy isn't just seeing a tough issue and saying, well, that's too much. There's two different sides. We don't have to reconcile. Let me write my bill and hand it to my people, and hopefully they can get it through. That's not the work of democracy. The work of democracy is to work through these tough issues with people you disagree with. We have folks on two different sides of the sexuality conversation on this panel, but we're still trying to find solutions rather than just escaping through kind of hyper-partisan rhetoric, ideological tribalism, and this mob mentality politics. I would also point them to the Utah Compromise, where the Mormon community came together with the LGBTQ community to find a solution, not just giving up, not just going in our corners and trying to shoot the other one down, finding a way to coexist in a healthy manner. So there's a way to get this done. You're not going to be able to find it by just listening to the surface partisan rhetoric, but we have examples. And if we're willing to seek our common ground and do things together, we can find it.